I have one message. That message is self-directed education is superior to regular school, but there's so many different ways of
Hmm.
diving into that for different audiences, for people on different points of the journey. Uh, I like the idea of like one message, lots of ways of approaching it.
Hi, this is Carl Rust, and I've worked in schools for over 30 years. I've learned a lot about how people learn, and I wrote a book called Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn: How We Can Transform Schools and Reintroduce Natural Learning. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn podcast. Today I have Katy Purviance with me from Spokane, Washington, and she has a really cool program out there that she's going to talk about. Um, just so, Katie, tell me a little bit about you and your background and what you're currently involved with.
Sure. I've been a teacher since 2013. I'm an English as a second language teacher. Most of my career has been abroad. I did my internship in Poland. My first job out of grad school was in the Middle East in Oman. I taught at the college level. And then I took a little break and then I started working with elementary school kids. I had a private student in China and I loved it so much I decided to go to China and teach elementary school. I ended up being in China for 3 years. I was there for the pandemic. And then after China, I was in Albania. And then I came back here just a few years ago, back here to the States. I started working in a local public school, still as an ESL teacher. And the big thing I kept coming face to face with was, yes, I love teaching. Yes, I love working with kids of all ages. Yes, I love my subject. I hate school. I don't, I'm not okay with how schools treat kids. I'm not okay with the coercion. I'm not okay with the compulsion. I'm not okay with the sit down, shut up, do as you're told model. Before I became a teacher, I got really interested in alternative education. Before education, I was an architecture student at Harvard, and I was really struggling. I had never struggled with school before until then. Um, and I started asking, why is school like this? And that was the question that changed my life. I found John Taylor Gatto. I found his book, The Underground History of American Education. And I left Harvard. I left architecture, and I read 40 books on alternative education that year. And so I knew, so that
Wow.
was the summer of 2009. And so I started to develop the idea at that point that I wanted to have my own school, but it was another 4 years before I actually became a teacher. I wasn't really interested in becoming a teacher at that point, but I loved the idea of an alternative. I got really into Summerhill, A.S. Neal's school, and I read a few of his books that summer, and I just revisited one of them last year, and it was so fascinating to see like how many of the ideas that he talks about directly influenced what I ended up creating. So a year and a half ago, I opened Washington State's only outdoor self-directed education center. We're in our second year. We opened with 19 kids. We have about 36 now, ages 1 to 18. We're all outdoors, year-round, screen-free, mixed age. And it's the most beautiful thing I've ever been a part of in my teaching career.
Yeah, that sounds great. Um, so that sounds really wonderful. What I kind of like to do one of the things I like to do is kind of explore, and I've interviewed different people. I haven't just interviewed educators, interviewed different people to kind of get a little bit of an idea of what people remember about school when they were in school. So, do you have any early memories about school?
Yeah, like I remember kindergarten. I remember nursery school. I remember preschool, like little snippets of it.
Hmm.
Um, I remember being outdoors a lot for my preschool. I
Hmm.
remember this one giant room with these giant wooden blocks, and the entire class was working together to move them to build a big pirate ship.
Uh-huh.
And I don't remember a single adult. I'm sure there was somebody there, but it was the 70s, so maybe not, right? I don't know. I remember digging in the school garden and playing with worms. I remember drawing outside, like I myself went to a co-op preschool, so I remember there being lots of other parents around and being and being outdoors a lot. And that's what I have now, a co-op
Mm,
with lots of parents around and we're outside.
nice.
And so some of those early memories were very fond and delightful and a treasure for me. And then I remember going into kindergarten where it was a little bit different, where there was a carpet with a grid on it and everyone had their name written on a piece of tape and you had to sit on your name and
Mhm.
stay there. And it was very much like this after so much outdoor time.
So, do you remember any negative experiences in school when you were growing up?
Mm. When I think about that, I think about certain moments and certain teachers, and I also think about who I was as a young child who didn't really know what this whole thing was about. For example, in first grade, I had this idea that we weren't allowed to talk, and so
Mhm.
I never talked because I was so afraid of getting in trouble.
Mhm.
And then by second grade, I figured out that other kids are talking and they're not really getting in trouble. And so in second grade, I couldn't shut up. I was so interested to talk to the other kids around me. I was in a 2-3 class, so second and third graders together. And I just kept talking to them, and my teacher would say my name. So I knew I was supposed to stop, but then she would turn her back. So I thought, okay, I can keep talking. And she would write my name up on the board. Wow, what an honor to get my name on the board. I didn't know that was a bad thing. And then I was staying after school almost every day. And it's like, I think she had in her mind of like as a teacher looking back, I think she in her mind had a very clear understanding of if you talk, you get your name on the board, 3 checks, and you stay after school. Like to her, that was very clear. But
Mhm.
as a 7-year-old, as an 8-year-old, that was not clear to me at all. Right. So things like that, the expectations that we adults have of children, but we don't make children privy to those
Mhm.
expectations, but we expect them to just know that there's a things that will get you into trouble and progressive trouble.
When I think over the years I did some substitute teaching and of course, I was a building administrator for a while, so I did a lot of observing of teachers in classrooms. And also, I would get called if somebody was misbehaving. And sometimes what I would do is come in the room and just kind of observe what was going on. And I think a lot of times the kids did kind of understand what the expectations were, but on some level, I don't know if it was they didn't agree with the expectations or they just were unable to do what, because we used to have I'm trying to think where the saying came from, but they used to say if they could do better, they would do better.
Yeah,
So it's almost like they couldn't help themselves. Like you were saying, you have something to say to your friend. There may be an inhibition that's from the teacher. It says no talking.
yeah,
But it's amazing. And depending on the style of the teacher, how autocratic they were,
yeah.
they, the amount of rebellion that was going on all the time was just amazing because the clear expectation was no talking, but people were talking all over the place.
Hmm.
And for some teachers, that would lead them to become very frustrated and very upset.
Yeah.
Um, but it was interesting because I was in some rooms where I think the teacher kind of on some level knew too that this was unreasonable because the level of enforcement would go up and down. And again, that would be very confusing for a child
Uh-huh.
because there were times when it was just like, oh, it would explode,
Yeah.
and other times when it just kind of was tolerated. That's interesting. Um,
As you're saying these things, it's making me think, um, the kids who come to my little school now, the kids who come from a more conventional school setting, they tend to be so shut down socially and verbally, and it takes a long time for them to start speaking. Or even if
mhm.
they're homeschooled, but they're not used to being around peers, it takes a long time for them to start speaking. And so when I look back from my experience and I look at who I was in first grade versus who I was in second grade, I would have been so proud of myself for finally speaking, for finally connecting with other
Yeah.
people's. Because when I see that in my little school, when a kid who has been silent for so long finally starts speaking, it warms me up. And I'm like, we're doing it. This is the
Mhm.
work. And so to look back and see, oh, I got in trouble for this
Yeah.
big leap in social development, it doesn't feel so good.
Well, I mean, yeah, we could talk about all that. Well, maybe we will, but did you have, how about your friends and family? Did they have any particular successes or difficulties with school as you were growing up?
Oh yeah. So I'm the oldest of five kids. I was first generation college. Um, my parents weren't able to help me with my homework anymore starting about fourth grade. So I really felt like I was kind of on my own with navigating school and figuring it out. Looking back, it feels like there was a just a basic expectation that the school was going to take care of my education, and so there was nothing additional my parents needed to do or expected to do. And so I look at that now in the context of some of the homeschooling families I work with and how much they do and how much research they do into different methods and how hard they try to find the just right thing for their kids. Like it's a just a different mindset, and I'm not blaming my parents at all for this. I think
Mm-hmm.
that was just the times where you send your
Hmm.
kids to school and you think you've checked that box, and it just looks very different now.
Yeah. Um, One thing that I found, I don't know if you've read Deschooling Society, Ivan Illich,
I've read some of it, yeah.
but he talks about how at some point in time that the teaching profession, learning became a professional. They became like doctors, and so it was like, I don't, and parents, you hear this a lot. Parents will say, I don't know how to teach. I'm not a teacher. Well, that's the product of our system that where we've said, okay, there's this class of people over here at the school that know how to teach and they know all about learning, and I don't have to think about it because they do it over there. And some parents are more involved, and other parents are more like your parents. They just, and I don't remember my parents being very involved in my education. They went to parent teacher conferences. I mean, they looked at my report cards and so forth, but um, and I probably didn't really share with them what was going on either. But when you have that professional class and you say, okay, those are the educators, and I don't know anything about that, that creates this weird dichotomy where, like you were saying, I watched one of your interviews and you're talking about how parents, help kids learn from the time they're born
Hmm.
until they enter school.
Right.
But then all of a sudden it's like, okay, I don't know how to teach. Well, and it's partly because our idea of what learning is wrong.
Yes, very much so. When I hear a parent say that they don't know how to help their child, they can't teach their child, I say, you are your child's first teacher. You taught them everything. You taught them, you helped them learn how to walk and how to feed themselves and how to get dressed and how to brush their teeth, like all of those things you did. And if you get to something in your child's education you don't know, it's an opportunity for you to learn right alongside them.
Yes.
And I think this is something else that came up for me while I was at Harvard. We got two main messages. One was we were so lucky to be there, and the other was that we weren't good enough to be there. And as I got deeper into what school is and the origins of our schooling system that John Taylor Gatto talks about in his book, it seemed very clear from the beginning that one of the intentions of school was to alienate the parents from the children
Hmm.
by keeping them apart from each other for so long, by making it compulsory, by sending homework home that ate into the family time um, to be to teach kids things that are not actually useful in day-to-day life, such that parents aren't able to help out with that, to change the methods of teaching so frequently that a parent can't really keep up, like with math. Like the way I learned math is different than the
Hmm.
way younger family members learn math is different from the way kids are learning math now. It's like you can't help them because it doesn't make sense to you anymore. It's like they switch the language or the code on you, so you can't do it. And I saw that, and It makes me think of Thomas Hardy's novel, Jude the Obscure. There's a scene where they follow the graduating class, and he has a line about how they had been inculcated into the idea that they were the most brilliant generation to walk the face of the earth, and nobody else has ever been like them. There's this idea that there's something really special about you, which feels good, but it's also, it kind of serves to alienate you from the generation that came before and then that comes after. And it destroys a sense of community that might otherwise be possible. And that's something
Mm.
that I'm actively trying to fix in my little school, the sense of a village, the sense that parents are there, that they are part of our community, that all different ages are there, that we help each other out.
Yeah, it's amazing how unwelcome parents feel at some schools. They
Yeah.
show up and they want to talk to somebody or they want to, God forbid, they want to actually observe a
Yeah.
classroom. That's just like, oh, no, that's so. When I was running my alternative program, one of the things I always told parents when we did our little intake meeting was, you are welcome here anytime.
Yep.
Come and ring the bell. We'll let you in. And we had all our parents' numbers on cell phone. We were talking to
Yep.
them all the time. But I never, I mean, I understand it, but I never thought it was okay. I think parents should be involved.
Yes.
They should be involved. They should know what's going on with their kid. And I have to say, Katie, and you probably know this too, because you spent time in conventional public schools and other kinds of schools. I think a lot of community members would be absolutely shocked if they saw the interchange between adults and children in school. I think they would be mortified and shocked. And that may be the reason that we don't really want adults coming into schools because I wish I had a really good example, but I've just seen over and over and over so many cases of adults bullying younger people
Yes.
when our whole message at school is, and you just did a Substack on this, our whole message at school is we don't tolerate bullying, but
But it's okay
adults
for the
do it all the
adults to do it to the
time.
kids. Yeah.
They do it all the time.
Yeah.
Talk about an imbalance of power.
Hmm.
That's one of the things that's supposed to define bullying, right? Imbalance of power.
Right.
Wow.
And the confusing message it sends, it's okay for me to do it to you, but you can't do it to anybody else.
And the kids that stand up to that bullying are the
Uh-huh.
ones that get in trouble and get expelled, get it suspended, expelled, or timeout or whatever. Or
And
since an
those are
alternative program,
right,
I kept getting kids in my alternative program. I kept thinking, this kid doesn't need an well, I mean, I was glad to have them
of
because
course.
we were doing a lot of cool things, but kept thinking, this kid doesn't need a different, they need a different environment. They don't need to come over here. They need you to change, but school is really hard time changing.
That
Um,
is true. You know, the kids who get in trouble all the time, who are always getting calls home and emails home, those are the leaders. Those are the
mhm.
ones who aren't willing to take it in the same way that some of their classmates are willing or able to take it. And when they're out of that system, like when I see them at my little school, those are the leaders. They're a natural
Mhm.
leader. If you're a natural leader, you're not going to put up with that kind of treatment. You're going to rebel. It's in your blood. Those aren't our troublemakers. Those are our leaders.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. It's well, anyway. So we've kind of explored a little bit why you wanted to make a different kind of school. How hard was it for you to communicate your vision to other people?
That's a really good question. So before I opened my school for about a year, it took me 18 months to open. Like I'd known I'd wanted to do this for a very long time, but once I really got started and was really, pushing forward, it took 18 months. I started meeting with parents one-on-one for coffee for about a year before we opened, to share my vision, to hear their thoughts. One parent said something that it's so obvious to me now, but at the time it wasn't. And she's like, "Why don't you ask parents what they want?" Like, like that's so obvious, right? But it took somebody telling me that to really get it. And so I was trying to find out what parents wanted as
Hmm.
far as like the logistics and the philosophy and all of that. Um, so your question again? I feel like I'm going off on a
Um,
rabbit hole. I'm like, wait, what was the
how hard
question?
was it to communicate your vision?
Yes, yes. So what was challenging for me in the beginning is I'm coming at it from a teacher point of view, but I'm talking to parents. If I
Mm.
had been talking to other teachers, it would have been a different story. And so, like, I was coming at it from here's everything that's wrong with school. Here are other schools like Summerhill and Sudbury that I'm very much aligned with, and here's how that looks. So I was coming at it from that point of view. And I realized that some parents I was talking to, they themselves went to school and it was difficult, and they were sending their own kids to school, and it was very difficult emotionally, psychologically for them to hear a teacher say what was wrong with what happened to them and what was currently happening to their own child. Like that was too much for some parents. There were some parents who were already there, and so it was much easier for them to hear me. But for people who weren't there yet, it was too much. Um, and then I feel like the next big thing I learned is that because I had seen so many negative things happen in a school system, that my communication and my vision tended to skew negative as well. All right, I was trying to convince people who had not witnessed what I had witnessed, what was wrong with school, what was so negative about it. And I realized that if I said, I hate school, hate's a very strong word, and that would
Mhm.
automatically turn some people off. They couldn't hear anything else I said. I
Mhm.
learned to say, I'm not okay with school. And that opened the door because most people are not okay with school. Like that's a very gentle word. And most people can think of something that they are also not okay with. And so that helped them to hear me a little bit more. So my messaging has very much changed over that time. And that's all thanks to just the one-on-one conversations I had with parents. I saw what the vision's always been the same. The vision has always been self-directed education. The vision has always been, respect children, see children as real people. Like Charlotte Mason says, that they are real people and we must respect them as real people. Like the vision has always stayed the same. But it was through my conversations with parents over that long time that I was able to adjust how I presented it so that they could really hear me instead of just, you know, assuming something else and shutting down.
Do you think you have to make any compromises to make your vision a reality?
I wouldn't say compromises. I would say iterations and adjustments. For example, we originally intended to become a Sudbury school until a few people reached out to me and they told me that there's a problem with Sudbury School. And I still love Sudbury. I'm not saying anything against it. But they said the problem was that they use a democracy and a problem with, and I was like, what are you talking about? A problem with democracy? Like that was, what do you mean? And the way that it was explained to me is that in a democratic setting, which we say we're a democracy, up to 49% of the people could be upset with a decision, and so they'll undermine it or
Hmm.
sabotage it. And so instead of that, it was suggested that I use sociocracy instead of democracy, which is a consent-based form of self-governance, where together we discuss whether or not a rule will meet our needs. And if somebody thinks it doesn't, they, please speak up and tell us what you see that we're not seeing so that we can adjust the rules so that we can all agree to it. And that's very different from a democracy.
Hmm.
And so I realized that, based on that change alone, that we weren't quite Sudbury, right? And so, I had to get a new URL and change the Facebook page name and get a new t-shirt and all that. Um, and so that's one example of an iteration where once more information became available, I realized I had to shift course. Another big thing is we never intended to become an outdoor school, but being indoors was cost prohibitive. We were too poor to be indoors. And that has turned out to be the most wonderful thing ever to be all outdoors. Like that is, I would say, the secret sauce of what we're doing. And so I'm so thankful that we were too poor to be indoors. So these are things that change the elements and the shape of our program today, but the vision of self-directed education and respecting the child have always been consistent.
So you do have a small indoor space, don't you?
Yeah, we have a very small house. It's 12 feet by 16 feet. It's very small. And so that's our library and our arts and crafts studio, and we store our our propane stove oven thing in there, and it's just a little enclosed space. And then we have a, carport adjoining that with a picnic table
Hmm.
underneath it. So yeah, but aside from that small footprint, we're on 10 acres of field and evergreens.
Sounds wonderful. I can't wait to
It's,
come up and see it.
oh, I hope you do.
So you were saying something earlier about, well, you said two things that I thought were interesting. One was consent.
Mhm.
And I've said one of the things I learned from all my different experiences, because I was in public schools for 35 years, and I did have a little short stint of running a little co-op at the local nature center, and then COVID came along and kind of put the axe to that. But one thing I think is interesting is I think that you probably things could be better for people in school, even if you have a curriculum and even if you have all the rigmarole that goes with that, if we could work on this idea of consent.
S-
And the other thing you said was, what do parents need? And in my office, when I was administrator, I had a little sign that I could see that wasn't real obvious to everybody else, but I said, what do they need? So whether it was a parent, a teacher, or a kid coming in to see me, I would always try to keep that in mind. What does this person need? And I think that would help. It wouldn't solve the problem, but I kind of work on public schools, and public schools are such massive, monolithic institutions that just little things I think can make a difference. So, can you talk about what is consent? What does that mean for the learner or the parent or who or even the other adults that are around?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked because that's what my next Substack article is about that comes out tomorrow morning. In less than 24 hours, you get to read all about it. Um, Consent is such a huge part of what we do. I wanted to give a shout out to Blake Bowles, who some years ago did a YouTube video called To Fix Education, Make It Consensual.
Hmm.
We have consent in most other areas of our lives, right? We're taught about consent in relationships, for example.
Hmm.
We're taught about like it's important. We've learned that it's important, and when we have it, we know that it's important. We can feel that it's important that we have choices. For some reason, this does not spill over into school. It does not spill over into children. Um, they're taught that they just don't have a say in how they spend most of their waking hours for most of their childhood days, for most of their childhood years, that they get no say in it whatsoever. Consent, as I mentioned, is also, how we self-govern in sociocracy, how
Hmm.
we decide which rules will pass, which rules we will abide by. Um, and you asked about adults too. I think it's really important for teachers to have the freedom and the ability to consent as well. There are so many things that are put on teachers' plates and more things put on teachers' plates and more things put on teachers' plates. They're expected to fill so many roles, from test prep to conflict management to classroom management to tracking data to keeping kids safe to biohazards. Like there's all kinds
Hmm.
of things that teachers are expected to do. Um, and all of it's top down,
Hmm.
right? It would be amazing if teachers had more say in exactly how their day is structured, what curricula they use, how they do it. I would love for an environment where teachers have the freedom to get to know their students and, like you said, give them what they need rather than forcing them all through this one size fits none gauntlet of somebody else's curricula and somebody else's pacing and somebody else's schedule as though they're products on a conveyor belt and it doesn't matter who they are, what they think, or what they care about. For me, it's all about the relationships one-on-one with people, the relationships of how we function as a group. And I don't think that people who aren't even in the room should have more say about what happens
Hmm.
in the room than the people who are there.
Well, and one thing I used to do when I was I became somewhat enlightened late in my career, and I read Peter Gray, and I actually talked my school corporation into buying me the Sudbury School Starters Kit, which they had no idea what it was, or they never would have paid for it. But
I love it.
so I got all these books and CDs and DVDs and all this stuff. And one thing over the years I came to realize was it doesn't really matter so much what rules and regulations come down from on high. It's then at my wherever I was, my refusal to participate in that. And the way I would do that was then I would just go to my group and I would say, well, I'll give you an example. The kids in my alternative program like to wrestle. They would go outside in the grass and they would wrestle and flop around and all this stuff. I got a phone call one day from my boss and he said, we're getting reports that your kids are fighting outside. I'm like, no, no, they're
We're
not
not fighting.
fighting. They're wrestling. Well, no more wrestling. I said, okay. So I went to the group and I said, here's what's happening. People are seeing you outside. They're seeing you, what you're doing. They're complaining about it. They're calling it fighting. What are we going to do about this? And so they came up with the solution. So we had this activity room that we could go in. There was very hardly ever anybody else in there. So we'll wrestle in the activity room. And if any adults come in, we'll stop. Okay, let's try that. And the other thing you talk about is iteration. So it reminds me of agile learning centers. And
Yeah.
one of the things they do is let's try this for 2 weeks and see how it works. So that's what I would say a lot is, well, let's try it and see what happens. So that was an example. There were many examples of when, especially since I was subject to upper administrators in the public school system,
Yeah.
even when I was director of elementary alternative, I still had an assistant superintendent was my boss. When I was a teacher and assistant principal, I always had people over me. But in one year, I spent a year teaching second and third or third and fourth grade high ability in the middle of the regular elementary school. And I had a boss plus the building principal, the building assistant principal. So we would get the same thing. No extra recess. Well, I get an email one day, no extra recess because we were outside a lot.
Good.
I called it extra recess, but it was really more like we were just outside a lot. And so I just took it to the group and I said, this is the email I got. What should we do about that? And the beauty of it is it's not just sharing the kind of the power. It's also another way to stimulate that part of their brain where they have to problem solve. And my big word for those kids that year was navigation. So we are navigating through this situation. We're in the middle of a school. All these other kids aren't self-directed. We are. All these other kids and teachers aren't. So we have to figure out how we're going to navigate through this. But again, I think even the public school, you could be in the most repressive public school in the world, but if you would go to your class and say, and I don't know if you know Derry Hannum, but you remember him saying
No.
something similar. He was from England and he did something similar. He did some self-directed experiments in a public school. He wrote a book. Oh gosh, can't remember the name of it now, but it's on Smash Words. I'll have to put it in the notes. But he had similar thing where he would just somebody would say, you can't do this, you can't do that. He would go to the younger learners and say, what are we going to do? Um, so what is the role of adults at your school?
Oh, good question. I facilitate a check-in meeting at the beginning of our sessions. We sit around the picnic table. We have a talk rock, a talking piece. Um, the idea is that if you have the talk rock, it's your turn to talk. And if you don't have it, it's your turn to listen. So no matter what, you get to do something. And I asked the kids, I said, what do you want to know about each other? What questions should we ask? And they'll usually suggest like 5 to 7 questions. It's hard to remember them all. So I say you only have to answer the questions you remember, and it's okay to skip anything. And then I answer for myself. And then I ask, which way should I go? And whichever side cheers the loudest or the first, I pass the talk rock and we go around. Adults are included. So we have a number of parents who stay every single time, and they are welcome to do so. And we hear from everybody. Everybody says their name, and they answer all the questions. And it's a way just to get to know each other a little bit more. It's interesting. Some of the younger kids will suggest questions like your favorite food, your favorite animal, your favorite mythological creature. And the older kids tend to suggest questions like, if you could teleport anywhere, where would you teleport to? Or what's something you're good at, but you don't like to do? Things like that. And both groups are mixed age. And so you can get these very rudimentary questions with these more philosophical questions all in one meeting. Um, we have over 20 kids plus parents on Fridays, so our meetings tend to last a little while. And then like Wednesday, the group is much smaller, so it's a much quicker meeting. And then after that, we have any announcements. If anyone has brought anything to share, that's the time for them to tell us what they brought. And then they're free. So they'll get up, they'll run around, they'll hang out together, they'll build a fort, they'll take a walk. They'll go look for bones around the property. We have deer bones and turkeys and things like that. They make up their own games. They'll read, they'll draw, they'll just do their own thing. And it's so beautiful. Last Friday, I had this moment. I looked around and it was this panorama of kids of all ages. That group has kids ages 2 to 18, all in one group, and they were all doing something different, all in different groups. Kids who had never played together were playing together, and it was this beautiful moment. And I said to the other adults there, I said, to go from an idea to reality is so satisfying. So to get back to your question about the role of the adults, we're just there. We're just there. Like some adults will bring something to share, like a craft project, or they're doing their own mending project, and they'll just bring it and they'll just do this interesting thing in the presence of kids.
Hmm.
Sometimes kids will say that and they'll say, I want to sew too. Great. We'll set you up and we'll teach you how to thread a needle and knot the thread and how to get going with that. Um, Sometimes we're preparing food. Sometimes we're just sitting around and talking. The number one thing I heard from parents, from moms, in all those one-on-one coffee dates, the number one thing I heard was, I am so starved for community.
Hmm.
So we have a number of moms who stay every single time. They've become really good friends with me and with each other, and we're our own village, right? And so the whole time we're like just watching out for the kids, and we're with each other, and it's this real sense of village. There are parents who have really stepped up and taken on more of a leadership role. There are parents who they see something that needs to be done and they just do it. Um, in the same way that I don't believe in coercing or making a child do something, I'm the same with the parents. Like I'm not going to be like, you go do this or anything like that. I want it to really feel like a village.
That's really interesting. So I'm wondering, do you ever offer like a more of a conventional class?
No, not per se. We have started talking about clubs, and the idea of a club versus a class is you can join a club at any point.
Hmm.
Excuse me. Like a class has a start date and an end date. With a club, you can start at any time and go as long as you're interested and then stop. You don't have to be like, oh my gosh, still a month to go, or oh, it's over already. And the idea is that, kids can start their own clubs based on their own interest. The club can, morph as their interests change. So we're looking at a few different ones, like a creative writing class, an architecture class, a history class, how to start your own business class, just as like starting points. So that's what that is looking like. But right now we only meet for 3 hours at a time. And right now we're just a homeschool co-op. So that's our starting point. Um, we're in talks with the local school district about being able to offer more days and more hours, and they have an indoor space for us, which will be nice in inclement weather. And at that point, I feel like we'll be able to launch these clubs. Right now, we're only there for 3 hours. And so, like, the kids have their own ideas of how they want to do things, and they can shift from activity to activity very fluidly and very quickly. And so, our current schedule and setup doesn't really lend itself to anything more formal. And right now, that's beautiful.
So what would you say has gone really well so far?
Mm, I would say the thing I am most proud of is seeing kids who were so shy in the beginning, who didn't talk, who didn't play, who didn't know what to do with this place. And now you wouldn't know it. They're very social and very active, and you could see the light has gone on within them, and their eyes are lit up and they're smiling. Like to me, that's what I'm most happy about. Our Friday teenagers, almost every single one of them started off as that kid who was so
Hmm.
shy and didn't talk and didn't know what to do. But now, as soon as our meeting's over, they're all over the place doing all kinds of things. And it's been so beautiful to witness this transformation in so many young people's lives.
What would you say the challenges have been?
Oh, let's see. I think my biggest challenge is how far we still are away from like the ultimate vision of being a full-time school. And we're working towards that, and that's always been the goal. So Washington State does have two other full-time self-directed education schools. They're both indoors. We're the only outdoor one. And they're both on the west side near Seattle. And both of them also started as a homeschool co-op. That's really the easiest way to get started, right? To start
Hmm.
getting some students and families and traction. And both of them were homeschool co-ops for 3 years, in the 90s before they were able to make that jump. And we're in year two, and we're in talks to make that jump. So we're on the right track. We're right on schedule with our predecessors. We've made a lot of contacts in the self-directed education world, and so we're doing well. We're doing well in that regard. But there's still this impatience, when you have a
Hmm.
vision that you're trying to bring to life. You're like, you wanted it yesterday, but it's probably going to be another year or so before we're finally there. But I think that's the challenge is that everything just takes longer than you want it to take. But that's also the beautiful unfolding of the vision day by day.
Great. Well, I want to make sure I get your links to put in the notes for the podcast and um, anything else you want to add?
I encourage people to subscribe to my Substack. It's my name, katypurviance.substack.com. I publish at least once a week, sometimes 3 times a week. If I have a burning issue I want to get into. But that has been such a cool place where people comment and
Hmm.
share their own thoughts about it. And I'm so interested every time somebody comments and they give their own perspective from their own experience, or they share with me like how things make sense now. Like it's really satisfying to feel like I'm making a difference. So I encourage that. And then I've also encouraged people to take a look at my website, the Spokane Learning Co-op. It's www.org. And I'm always, always interested in hearing from people, whether those are, other teachers who are looking to make that jump from a conventional school system to starting their own school. I love having those conversations. I love hearing from parents who are at their wits' end with school and they're not sure what to do next, but they feel like homeschooling's too big of a jump. The parents who are new to homeschooling and they're replicating school at home and still facing those same challenges, and they need that permission to let go a little bit and embrace more of a self-directed education philosophy. Like anyone at any one point along the journey, I love having those conversations. I'm always up for going back and forth over email or a phone call or anything. I just love connecting with other people.
Wonderful. Yeah, and I'm the same way. I love to talk to people, and if anybody's thinking about doing something different, whether it's inside the public school system or it's starting your own, I'd love to talk to you. Also, one group that I'm still involved with, but not as much. We formed a group a few years ago called the Unschooling School Group, and our basic premise was taxpayers pay for public schools, so therefore parents are the owners of the school. So you can demand whatever kind of school you want for your younger learner, and the school should do it. Now, I know from past experience, That may not be an easy sell, but we offer some tools and we actually developed a thing called, um, was it called? Uh, I can't remember, but it was like an IEP, but it was for self-directed, making your kids self-directed inside the public school. And basically, one thing I tell parents a lot is one of the things you can tell your younger learner is we don't care about grades. We don't care about tests. And we don't care about homework. If you want to do the homework, fine. If you don't want to, that's fine too. And you can tell your teacher, my parents have said that I don't have to do this. And it's been a tough sell, to be honest. People are pretty much afraid, probably from their past experiences with schools. But I've gone to parent teacher conferences and I will do it virtually also if people need some
That's
support.
You raised a really interesting point about how parents have their own school trauma that they carry with them as their own child is in school. And parents, I hear this a lot from moms, like they're not okay with what's happening, but they feel afraid to
Mhm.
speak up. And as you said, the parents are the owners of the system. They're the ones paying for it, and we should listen to them, and what they have to say is important. And it's a little heartbreaking to see a parent, somebody whose whole role is to protect this little person and raise them and bring them up to adulthood, and they're afraid. They're afraid of advocating for their kid in a system that hurt them too.
Yeah, just put a meme on Facebook that said, "Who holds the power? Who really holds the power?" Because you could have schools without school boards, without administration, without building administration. You need teachers and kids probably to have schools, but everybody else is expendable.
Yeah.
And if people would realize that and they would get together, they have so much power. They just don't
Yes.
realize how much power they have.
Well said.
Well, thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe so you can be notified each time a new episode comes out. Check out my book, Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn: How We Can Transform Schools and Reintroduce Natural Learning. A couple podcasts I recommend are Liberated Podcast with Carrie McDonald and Fair the Free Child with Akila Richards, and also Katie's Substack. We're going to put that link in there. Um, Thanks for listening, and remember to get out of the way and let kids learn.
Thank you so much.
This has been Get Out of the Way and Let Kids Learn podcast. If you liked it, please subscribe, follow, share, and leave a comment.